What's up, everybody? Just having a little casual chat out here, Saturday night. I've been on a something totally different, not totally different really, but on a new kind of really exciting philosophical endeavor, which is the works of the Neoplatonists. I've been exposed to Plato and Platonism I've been reading Plato for a couple of years at this point, reading the dialogues, and specifically reading and rereading the Republic, because it's kind of the masterwork of Plato's career in a lot of ways. But so that would be, I guess, that's sort of the golden age of Plato in a way. I'm about to get eaten up by mosquitoes out here. Unfortunately, they're going nuts right now. But I kind of stuck around the more golden age Platonic dialogues, like, the Crito, the Phaedo, the Symposium, the Republic. Those are the real big ones. You got, with the Symposium, you have the Ladder of Beauty. With the Republic, you get introduced to kind of the developmental, or the groundworks for what Platonism becomes, which is a monotheistic philosophy in a way of the form of the good is introduced in Republic Book 6 or Book 7, and it's the Republic is discussing justice, which we find out that justice is for the individual. They're discovering what justice is good for. Why justice is, I'm speaking horribly, why justice is good for the individual, regardless of what it gets you, and why it's good for society. They're actually finding out why it's good for the individual through thinking about the larger implication of the polis, of the society. They're sort of taking the individual and blowing it up. They're making it bigger, so that I think, as he says, from looking, as Socrates says, for people who have poor eyesight, you need to look at things closer or make a larger scale to understand smaller things. And the correct, what you're going to discover in the Republic is a couple of different myths. There's the myth of the metals, which represents elements of the soul, the tripartite soul. There's 3 elements to the soul, which is the appetitive, which is the bronze, and then the silver, which is the thumatic, which is the part of you that wants to be the best, that wants to be great. That's like what we've been talking about with Odysseus. The thumatic, the silver, the spirited part of him is what called out to Polyphemus and gave him his name and address. That would be the silver part leading the rational, which is the gold. So there's bronze, silver, gold, and everybody has these elements in their soul, but what justice is the correct ordering of these elements. So if the rational is at the top, and that's what leads the rest of you, if the rational is able to lead the spirited part, and the spirited is able to lead the appetitive, oh man. Can you see that squirrel? Dang it, I can't zoom in. I'm gonna go see what he's doing.
What you doing? Come here, coward. Come over here. Come on over here. You're not a real intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
I was about to hit him, throw the book at him. This is Plotinus, the Aeneas, or the Aeneads, excuse me, not to be confused with the Aeneid by Virgil. This is the Aeneads by Plotinus. Thick book. You know, I could hit somebody with this and really do some damage. But what was I saying? I was talking to you about the Republic and justice and the correct ordering of the soul. The correct ordering of the soul is justice for the individual, and they're going to create the ideal city, at least what Plato thinks the ideal city is. And there's a lot of things in there where it's like, oh, this is the framework for a totalitarian government. I don't think that Plato thinks that this could be realized. And this is in the Republic. He says it himself, is like, this could never actually exist. This is an idealistic framework. And so that means if we're trying to find create the perfect city, we will do whatever we have to do in order to make that happen. Even if that means having everything in common, like communism. He basically invents communism. Having everything in common. Aristotle's going to have problems with this later because he brings up a good point. Is like, people typically take care of things better and care more about things if they have private property and it's not all common. It's a good point. So there's lots of problems if we were to think about the ideal city in a sense to try to make this realized within this lower realm of substance. Okay, the substantial world. This is more applicatory to the soul. Okay, that's what you're supposed to get from this ideal of the perfect city, is the correct ordering of the soul with gold on top, with reason leading reason leading the thematic, the spirited, and the spirited leading the appetitive. They're all in line going up to the rational. But within this, we're going to get the idea of the form of the good. Now, the forms, I've spoken to you about the forms. Let me just briefly try to run through it. I've said it a million times. You guys probably know what it is, but this is not a pipe. This is a imperfect instantiation of a pipe. This is becoming. This pipe will degrade. This pipe will change over time. Actually, you can see that it's changed from my use of it. It's degraded, and there's things about it have changed. So if things change, how are we really going to know about the essence, the thing? It's the thing in itself, because Plato wants to think about things mathematically, where things don't change. The number 2 never changes. The number 4 never changes. The number 7 never changes. None of these things, they're always what they are, and they're clearly definable as what they are. So you can actually know about it. But things like this, you can't know about it in the same way, in a deductive sense, because this is in a state of becoming. The number 7 is in a state of being. The number 7 is. Okay. And if you read the Pre-Socratics, you'll understand this idea of being and versus becoming, and whether everything is being or whether everything is becoming. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But the conclusion of the Republic is that we should have the correct ordering of our souls, and they're the forms of things, the perfect ideas. So we're on the lower scale, on the divided line, which is another thing that's introduced in the Republic, of things down here on earth, in this substantial plane of things that change all the time. Down here in the state of becoming, we have these imperfect things which are always changing. Things that are always changing can never be perfect. So, but this is a reflection which partakes in a ideal form or an essence. So there's, in the realm of intelligibility, which is going to be a later kind of term for that, we're going to have perfect not representations. These are representations of the perfect things which don't exist here, like here where I'm holding this, but in the accessible only to the intellect, only to the rational. So where was I going with that? So, okay, so there are these forms, and these things apply to things. The most easily accessible are things like beauty, things like justice, virtue, all these things. There are perfect ideals, perfect forms of these things, which are accessible only to reason, accessible only to the intellect. Okay, you can't go there, you can't strap on some shoes and walk there, you can't get on a horse and ride there, you can't get in a boat and sail there, you can't hop on a plane. They've never heard of planes, but you can't fly there. You know, you just can't get there within this realm. Okay, so they're accessible only to the intellect, to the philosopher, to philosophy. And so but the ultimate, the thing that allows all of these forms to be intelligible, is the form of the good, which is essentially God. God is actually outside of all of these forms, and he transcends the forms. Okay, so he transcends beauty. He transcends being called a he. He transcends being called an it. It's not an it. It's okay, this is all going to get worked out further within Plato if you read Parmenides. Parmenides is it's a dialogue where young Socrates is speaking to Parmenides. He's a pre-Socratic philosopher, and young Socrates is speaking with him about the one. Okay, it's a monad. The one. Don't give me. Read the Parmenides. You're gonna get a headache from reading this. It's a lot of sort of logic chopping. You will. I remember at the end of reading through the Parmenides for the first time, sort of shutting the book and just like had to like ice my brain down from reading it, because it's like we're going to posit an idea about the one, and then we're going to we're going to consider that this could be the truth about the one. Then we're going to consider the opposite of what this could be about the one, and then we're going to consider the consequences of it being the opposite. We're going to consider every aspect of this idea, which is the one. The one is this is basically God. It exists outside of existence. It transcends being. It so it doesn't exist, but it exists. It that doesn't make it doesn't make sense. It's almost an oxymoron. It's the ground of being. It is being, actually. Go read the Parmenides, you'll see what I mean. But this is a big idea which is going to be picked up later on. So all of the forms, the good, all these things actually exist within the one. The forms, the realm of the forms, the place of the forms, whatever, is akin to the mind of God. Okay, if you want to put it that way. And so the perfect ideas about beauty and justice are things that we can observe here on earth, and we can have ideas and opinions about them. We can opine about these things, but we can't know them in the way that God knows them. God is the only one that fully understands the form. We can, by virtue of the soul going up to the nous, or the mind, the intellect, thinking about these forms, thinking about pondering the form of the good and the form of beauty, the form of all these things, you're not going to, you can find the reflections of these things on earth, but you can't see the forms themselves here. Okay, so I can look at a beautiful woman and say, she partakes. This is a concept that is just permanently fixed in my brain. It's like, it partakes in beauty. This thing partakes in beauty. And when things partake in, let's just talk about the form of beauty real quick. Beauty is, let's say, a perfect form. And all of the rest of the forms are actually made intelligible by the form of beauty, which is, by the way, a lot of this is coming from the later tradition of the Neoplatonists, okay? This is the Neoplatonists write this out in more of a formulaic, more of a formula. The Platonic dialogues are artful and beautiful, okay? They're beautiful works of art. They're poetry, in a way, that are actually philosophy. But it's not like they're not treatises. This is more taking what's in Plato and making it sort of treatises and talking about them more as like concepts that are devoid of the dialectic, in a way, if that makes sense. And I could be saying that wrong. For those of you Platonists watching me, the wise man loves to be corrected, so please correct me. Cure my ignorance. But so beauty, I can look at a beautiful woman and say that she partakes in the beautiful. She herself is not beautiful, but she partakes in the form of beauty. Okay, there's something about that. And it doesn't just have to do with bodies. We can look at bodies of, people's, the object of the body, okay, and say that this object, the body of this person, this beautiful woman, is beautiful. But then you get to know the subject, which is within that body, within that object, and then you find out that the soul is actually beautiful. And that's more important than the form, not in the ideal sense, the idea or the essence, but the form that we are akin to seeing down here partakes in beauty. But also the soul partakes in beauty, and that's the more beautiful thing. And Plotinus actually goes into this a little bit. I just read the section on beauty, and he's got so much good things to say about that. But he says that we could boil it down to like, okay, well, beauty has something to do with symmetry and things being in harmony. Okay, so somebody that's really beautiful, you may notice that people they have beautiful bodies, but then you talk to them and you realize that their soul is quite ugly, and they're only concerned with the lower substantial things, and they're not concerned with anything higher. They're not concerned with, okay, they're you could say vapid. Okay, they're only concerned with the baser things, and it's sort of vulgar. And when you talk to these people, you say, well, it doesn't matter how beautiful the outside is. What matters more is the inside, okay? But when both are beautiful, when the form being the body is beautiful as well as the soul, when these two are combined and are in harmony with one another, this is beautiful. It partakes in true beauty. But not just to talk about bodies, music is beautiful. Sounds are beautiful. It's actually been found within brain studies, brain scans, that people who are brilliant mathematicians find mathematical proofs to be beautiful, actually. And in the same way where the Platonic dialogues are beautiful to me, I think that those also partake in beauty. Even though it's not just a purely visual thing. It's something, and Homer is beautiful. The way that he writes about things, I've said this all the time, it's beautiful. The way that he describes things, the way that things just sort of flow, and the poetry is amazing. And it is truly beautiful. So it doesn't apply purely to the visual, though that's how we readily access beauty, is through the visual, through the senses. But you can also ponder beauty, and you can be beautiful, you can understand beauty by understanding the correct ordering of the soul, by understanding virtue and attaining to virtue, and thinking about the eternal things, eternal forms, eternal concepts. And realizing, you know, the Platonists, here's something about the Platonists. They really place very high priority. I would consider myself a Christian Platonist, I think. Because I think that the two are very similar in a lot of ways. I think that the two are describing what's in the Bible in a mathematically rigorous way, void of the sort of like some of the doctrinal, theological stuff. I mean, they come to very, very similar conclusions, and I just really like it. I mean, Plato, the Platonic dialogues have changed the way that my brain thinks about things. And so I can't help but think about things in a Platonic framework, honestly. And which makes sense, because then a lot of Christians don't know this, but they're actually speaking in Platonic language a lot of the time, and they don't even know it. They've never read Plato. They don't know where these ideas come from, which is kind of funny. Because a lot of early Christian church fathers were Platonists. Saint Augustine, he was very aware of the works of the Neoplatonists, and also Aristotle a little bit. Everybody back then had different misconceptions about Plato and about Aristotle, and Aristotle's is in a lot of ways very different from Plato, and not everybody grasps that, I guess. Not everybody used to grasp that, but it's interesting to see kind of a synthesis happening with the Neoplatonists and Aristotle, which is cool. But then this is going to go on to influence a lot of Christian church fathers. And I'm also reading right now, along with Plotinus, along with a bunch of other stuff, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite. That's really, really interesting. I really like it. Because he's talking about this stuff in ways that I can understand, and he's speaking a language which I get. You know, I understand the language of Christianity. This is just like another angle of it, which is really cool, which aligns with other things that have always when I would read Plato, even before I believed in in God necessarily, or specifically in Jesus. I always, when I would read Plato, I said this to my dad, it was like, it felt like I felt something from that was different, that was transcendent, like I was going up, I was being lifted up, which is a similar feeling, which was interesting. Nothing else had really done that to me besides reading the Bible, which was, it's crazy. So there's something transcendent about this stuff. But reading Pseudo-Dionysius is really interesting and really cool. Also Meister Eckhart, who's going to be taking the tradition of this sort of Christian mysticism from Pseudo-Dionysius. But Pseudo-Dionysius is a Christian that is basically a Neoplatonist as well. Now, the two definitely do not perfectly overlap, okay? There's a lot of things that you gotta take with a grain of salt, which would be scripture. You need to contrast and compare these things and see that what Pseudo-Dionysius is doing is sort of pushing you in the direction of explaining Scripture through this logically rigorous kind of framework of Platonism, which is right up my alley. It's combining my two favorite things. Okay, so a lot of people would get their feathers, get their shorts in a knot over that, you know. Leave it to Christians, which are supposed to be unified, to get completely disunified about something, a disagreement in theology. I mean, everybody does it, but you know, with Christianity, with religion, of course, it gets totally brought to another scale of like, well, not only are you wrong, but you're going to be punished eternally for being wrong. Whereas, you know, amongst philosophers, you could just say, well, I just think you're wrong. Okay. So there's that. So if you're getting your feathers in a ruff over what I'm saying, that I really like Plato and I really like, that I'm a Christian, I think that the truths, the form of truth, okay, is present in both. I think that the truths in Plato do not contradict the truths in Christianity, for the most part. There are certainly things, like the Platonists would definitely throw out the idea that the one God that transcends being, that isn't, but yet is the groundwork for things that are, came down from whatever that is. We can't even talk about it. Okay, language can't bring you to understanding that. I mean, we can have opinions about it and ideas about it, which might get close, but you're actually not going to get very far saying what God is, in like a way that you have to use metaphor, which is just completely not going to get you even close. It can push you in the direction of maybe kind of getting it a little bit. It's never going to get you there. So then you get negative theology, which is what is in Pseudo-Dionysius. He's saying, actually, this is what God is not like. So we have affirmative theology and we have negative theology, which is God actually transcends existence. Okay, so if you're trying to prove God in like a empiricist way of like, we're gonna go in the lab and do God experiments, well, you're wasting your time, you're spinning your wheels, because he transcends existence. That's straight from Platonism. So in a lot of ways, and the Bible has all kinds of very poetic ways of talking about God, poetic ways of describing a thing which is indescribable. I believe in Romans it says that he's undescribable and inscrutable, which means you can't know about him. Okay, so, but we can make poetic images to try to push you in the direction of understanding this this inscrutable thing. Okay, you get what I'm saying. And so, with that, the Platonists say, this thing which transcends being, how is it going to bring itself, it can't bring itself down to a form which is on this lower plane, which would be what Jesus does, right? He's a physical embodiment of logos. Okay, there's a reason why John says logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That word is logos, which is divine reason. Now, within that context, whoever wrote John, whether you say it was John, the guy himself, or whether you say it was a later, it couldn't have been John, I don't know, I haven't researched, but I've heard both sides. Whoever writes this down, the book of John, was aware of the Platonic and Greek tradition. He was aware of this sort of line of thought. That's why he says logos. That might be controversial. I've talked to Christians where like, that makes no sense. And I say, okay, well, whatever. But think about the time and the area that he's in and who he's writing to. And it does make sense, actually. It makes a lot of sense. He's like, you guys, and when he goes to the Areopagus, he says, you know, you guys are quite religious. I see you have a shrine to the unknown God. Turns out I know the God that that's remaining unknown. Okay, this divine logos, this divine reason is Jesus. Okay, so, but the Platonists would definitely reject, the Platonists would reject Christianity, or Christianity sometimes would not reject Platonism. Okay, all right, so, but it's really, really cool, really exciting for me. So, that's what I'm on. What are you guys been on lately? I've also been listening to. The fact that I have a job means that I can't be reading all the time, unfortunately, but I can be listening to audiobooks. And try framing and listening to the Parmenides or the Timaeus. It's actually it's quite fun because I just re-listen to it over and over and over and over until it's almost like you can't help but absorb some of it if you listen to something enough times. And I've read it, so of course reading it physically, interacting with it with a pen. Okay, that's how you interact with your books, is you're actually engaging with it, underlining, writing things, drawing things. That's how you interact with your books. Destroy your books. I've always said this. Destroy your books. Interact with the book. Mark it up. If you want a nice copy, buy another one that's nice. But buy a textbook like this and destroy it. That's where you get a lot of real legwork done. But listening to things at work, which is what I've been really liking doing, that's also what I've been on a little bit too, is listening to sort of the later Platonic dialogues like the Timaeus. That's where you get the idea of the demiurge, the creator God, which is also the one, which is also the good. But then also there's a great book by a individual, Josh Nadeau, and I believe the book is called Room for Good Things to Grow, and it reminds me of Christian Fight Club, the way that it's structured, and it's him narrating the book, and in a lot of the ways he's describing his life as a Christian and the sort of mundane, like he's got problems in his Christian walk of faith, and when he's talking to these people, of course, he's like a drunk. He's getting drunk all the time. He's a slave to alcohol. He's a slave to immediacy. He's not transcending. He's not thinking about the form of the good all day, which is what you should want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to think about, that's another thing. I'm spazzing right now. I'm sorry, I'm being hyper, but I'm just so excited. Plato basically says in the Republic, is like, once the philosopher, the true philosopher, once you kind of get a glimpse of the form of the good, once you sort of realize that's all you want to do all the time. You just want to think about that all day. And it's so true. It's so true. You just want to think about that all day. And it's almost like the things down here in the realm of substance are just uninteresting. And I find myself like hearing conversations, being in and around people, and just kind of like zoning out and just being like, this is so, you're bored with things. You get bored with the mundane talk about the lower things. But I also, reading this Josh Nadeau book has been good, because it's like, it's talking about, we've gotten so lost as Christians about this sort of transcendent, like thinking about, a lot of times it's not really, though, thinking about this transcendent, like, goodness, and thinking about God and trying to connect with God. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's seemingly a lot of logic chopping and doctrinal sort of herd dynamics, at least in what I've seen. It's just sort of a curated herd dynamic, which, we really want to keep that, controlled and contained, which I'm not too interested in personally. It's either that or it's the ritual, which are all great things. All these things are great. It's just when they're the main focus is when it becomes out of balance. But people get wrapped up in this sort of idea that the body and everything on earth here is just sort of garbage and nonsense, and we're just really waiting to die so that we can go be with the one, which is true. That is our hope. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to do while we're here on earth, is attain and try to be in union with the source, with God, with Jesus, with the form of the good. We want to interact with all these things, but we've been given this body. We were here for a reason, and the problem is mistaking the things here on earth for the things up the divided line in the realm of the forms with God. We've mistaken these imperfect things for perfect things, and we're concerned with these things alone. But because of that idea, we've forgotten the beauty in ordinary things, that normal, natural things partake in beauty, and that we have been given these things. We've been gifted these things. We've been gifted a beautiful day like I'm enjoying right now. We've been gifted nice pipe tobacco. We've been gifted the Aeneids, philosophy. All of these things are amazing. The intellect, the mind that's able to rationalize, these things are awesome. And but not even just that, just like that's what I like. That's what I'm really into. Working out, lifting weights. These are all things that are what Nadeau would call sort of like a liturgy, he calls it, or something like that, where it's like a moment where you get to connect and appreciate the good in small things here down within the substance, within the substantial world. And so you're not leaving your body behind. You're getting the fullness of it all. You're not just sort of saying everything down here is evil. All we can do is just hope and attain and try to transcend. It's yes, that, but also enjoy the things down here. And here's the thing that drives me nuts. Christians that are fat asses. Okay? This is where I gotta bring in a little bit of Plato to these guys. Yes, the mind, understanding and attaining to the good, to God, is an amazing thing. And that's what we should really be, that's the main goal and focus. But that is trying to partake in beauty, but then also down here, synthesizing or correctly orienting or harmonizing, that's the word I'm looking for, harmonizing the form which we are in and the form which is within. Okay? That's the harmony. So the body is important as well. Okay? I'm drinking beer. It's, not good for the body. All right? I know. But I do think that this partakes in the good a little bit. Not too much. No. Have to be like Socrates. Can drink but never is drunk. Like in the Symposium. But the Josh Nadeau book, I think it's called Room for Good Things to Grow. It's a good book where he's talking about his sort of spiritual walk, his journey with God, and discovering God in his life, like in his everyday life, God is something, God is something that is experienced every day. Should be. It's not something that is experienced on a certain day of the week in a certain location. God is not limited to a piece of paper with ink on it either. Look at everything around you. Enjoy the beauty. The beauty reflects up to him. Okay. I think we're at 40 minutes. We had better be done. The form of the good has actually gone below. However, the rays of light we're still partaking in it a little bit. But that's an interesting thing, real quick before we end. Pseudo-Dionysius, he actually describes God as darkness, which is... Okay, be careful, but don't jump right away into saying he's a heretic. All right, I'm sure I'm pretty sure he was labeled a heretic, or there were claims leveled at him that were like, "Oh, this could be heretical." Look, it's not canonized. He's not in the Bible. Okay, he's a I guess he's a philosopher. He's a Christian philosopher. So of course you're not going to give him the same gravity, the same weight. You get what I'm saying? But he says, and he brings up an interesting point in Exodus when Moses goes up on the mountain. He goes up on the mountain into the darkness where God was. And he's talking about how Mount Moriah was God, like, he's pointing out that God is not a body. God wasn't like chilling on the mountain. God resonates everywhere because he transcends everywhere. But he's in the darkness where God, he has to go up to the darkness where God was, which is really, whoa, like that does something to my brain. And the way that Pseudo-Dionysius writes is so beautiful and eloquent, and he kind of talks about, he almost is using like oxymorons similar to like Nietzsche, where it's like, whoa, that does something very cool to my brain, which I really like. It's shining rays of darkness. But okay, the darkness being that God is unintelligible, he's inaccessible to reason fully, okay, because he's outside of everything. However, he shines the leitmotif, the motif of the light, is that God is able to shine intelligibility onto truths. But himself, he is a mystery, so he is described as this sort of darkness in a way. That's all really interesting. I don't fully understand it yet, so don't take anything I'm saying as like this is what it is. Go read him for yourself. Go read Pseudo-Dionysius. I believe the book I'm referencing, I have the complete works. The one I'm referencing is the Divine Names, I think. So, man, yeah, that's it for now. All right, have a good weekend.